didn't know how to handle. I by no means have all the answers, but I will do my best to facilitate and give you guys as much information as I can. Do you have any questions or anything come up for you from the last presentation that might discuss? All right, cool. So I just had one lady, she's an assistant principal. Yeah, she just said she's like, man, I totally know what you're talking about. She subscribed to the fact that before it was kind of like people in her circle that she knew were struggling. She just thought it was like, just stop. It's a lot more than that. So hopefully open your eyes to something new. So as supervisors, you guys are responsible for overseeing folks that you might see who are struggling on the job. And like my experience with Dave Ramsey, there's a point, absolutely, where somebody that's addicted or somebody with substance use disorder needs to get booted and needs the consequence of being let go, absolutely. I'm not saying don't. Somebody doesn't need to be fired if they haven't earned the right to be fired. One thing we're trying to do is just kind of get people to maybe consider, as this problem is getting worse and worse, I don't see the disconnection between humans getting better with technology, and now we're going to have like Google glasses, or we're going to have screens in front of our faces at all times, and we're not even going to need to look at our phones, right? Because we have the watches. We already have the watches. Where I have a coworker I work with in our marketing department, and I was sitting there having a conversation with her, and her watch will vibrate. And she, let me check that text, let me check that email. It's like, you just put your freaking watch down, and then we're having a conversation. Are we recording this? Don't let her see that. So anyway, I don't see our just being naturally connected in our communities getting better. So as more and more people might struggle with that disconnection, and they're going to have to fill that somehow, you might see more and more folks struggling. So I'm just trying to plant seeds with people that maybe companies or organizations could put in policies that kind of a tiered system. We have somebody we've identified as somebody that needs help. Dave Ramsey knew that I needed help. Hey, John, we'd like to offer you, here's a resource. There's an outpatient facility close by, which was literally across the street. When I went through outpatient, it was across the street from Dave Ramsey's office. And so I would go out there when people were on smoke breaks, and I would just look at the office building. And I'm like, yeah, I just got fired from there, and here I am. I went to 45 days of treatment in Arizona, and I came to Cumberland Heights outpatient. There I was. So I wish Dave Ramsey's organization had a resource to be able to say, hey, let's start here. Or, yes, you've earned the right to be fired, so here you go, but here's a pamphlet. Here's somebody to call, because I didn't know where to go. At that point, it's like, whoa. And so we started with our church counselor. And say, look, I need help with alcohol and substance abuse, so where do I go? And so we were given a list of some resources from our church counselor. But so yeah, you might see some stuff, and so you can kind of be a little more on the front lines of what's going on. And so just trying to let you guys be aware of issues and how you might be able to address those. So 4 major areas of addiction in the workplace would be injuries and accident rates tend to increase. You have absenteeism and extra sick leave, loss of production, and the worst case scenario is premature death and fatal accidents on the job. Additional problems can include tardiness and sleeping on the job. I've done that before, passed out at work. Hangover or withdrawal affecting job performance. It's meaning poor decision making. It's meaning loss of efficiency. It's meaning theft. Pretty much, yeah. Increased likelihood of having trouble with coworkers. Illegal activities at work, including selling illicit drugs to other employees. Or in school setting, you might see people passing medications around, trading medications around here, and that could be in a supervisor role or with your, with other employees or with the students. And higher turnover and training new employees. Costs associated with addiction in the workplace, substance use drains more than this is crazy stat. This is from the National Conference Proceedings report from the Office of Drug Control Policy. $100 billion from businesses every year. Substance use does $100 billion. So it's significant impact in the workplace. Workers' compensation claims can go up 38 to 50%. Related to substance abuse, and substance use abusers file 3 to 5 times more workers' comp claims. And of course, medical costs increase increase for companies up to 300% more. Absenteeism, people are 2.5 times more likely to be absent 8 or more days a year. That was me and my addiction. It's like max out my in school I was allowed a certain number of absences in school. I wouldn't get close to that because I wanted to be in class. It was like the teacher's pet. But once addiction came in, it was like, man, how many days can I take off and just barely slide by? Again, loss of productivity, 30% less productive, and turnover rates. Here's a huge stat. It costs businesses an average of $7,000 to replace a salaried employee. As we talk about the Tennessee Drug-Free Workplace, and one of the requirements to be considered a certified Tennessee Drug-Free Workplace, like you guys are accomplishing with this training, is drug testing, and that can be a steep cost for some companies up front. They're looking at anywhere between $50 to $100 per test on average. It can be a significant investment to be able to do that. But if you look here on the back end, and this number I've seen not just here, but I've seen this number in a number of different resources around the state and around the United States that says it's $7,000, and that's what on average, that's what I cost Abraham C's organization by coming in, training me, and trying to bring me up to speed, and then kicking me out less than a year, spit me out less than a year later. I just drained a bunch of time and resources from them. So one thing that it's good for companies to do is to do the drug screening up front, try to weed out anybody, or say, hey, go get help, hey, go get clean, and feel free to come back and try it again. Postal Service says here's just a couple of kind of studies and statistics, kind of give you a kind of take the heartbeat of what's out there. U.S. Postal Service workers demonstrated those who tested positive for marijuana, not surprisingly, have 55% more accidents, 85% more on-the-job injuries, and 75% higher rates of absenteeism. Cornell University said that construction companies that drug tests reduce the rate of workplace injuries by 51%. So test up front, less likelihood, get some money in. Having drug policies in place can help minimize the damage for companies. Here's kind of in the trucking world or transportation world, 1 out of every 4 heavy truck drivers killed in work-related accidents have at least one drug. That's excluding alcohol in their system that contributed to the accident. The Journal of Forensic Sciences says random sampling of fatally injured truck drivers showed that 35% of the drivers had drugs or alcohol in their system. At the time of the accident, 89% of the accidents, the drug or alcohol contributed to the cause of the accident. So, and a couple of the treatment places that I went to, there was definitely truck drivers present. I think the lack of connection on the road all the time, isolated, alone, doing a job, they're getting the job done, but they're away from their families. They're away from, just like any job, it has its downsides. But I think the trucking industry, I can just imagine being, really isolated in that cab all day long, day after day after day. National Transportation Safety Board says that 1 out of every 4 heavy truck drivers killed. Just did that. Small and medium businesses are most at risk. A lot of them don't have the resources to implement drug policy or some of these policies that we're talking about. I've heard Lance Wheaton speak. He's the program director for the Tennessee Drug-Free Workplace. I've spoken alongside him on a number of occasions, and he said that he's heard of companies that when they have this signage up when they're doing an interview in-house, and they have a poster up that says, we conduct drug testing, that they've literally had a guy just they've literally had people just take the resume right back and go, I'll see you later. I don't think it's going to be a good fit. Substance users can tend to steer away from from companies that are Tennessee Drug-Free workplaces. So looking at mental health in the workplace, the Institute of Medicine and National Research Council found cost-benefit ratios for early treatment and prevention programs for addictions and mental illness programs range from 1 to 2 to 1 to 10. So in short, what they're saying is every dollar spent up front can save an organization $2 to $10 on the back end. Just to reiterate the fact that trying to save that $7,000 for replacing salaried employees, you want to try to avoid those instances when you can. Some reasons employees are slow to invest in services are misconceptions about the cost effectiveness and effectiveness of treatment, lack of information about the direct and indirect costs of mental health in the workplace, just overall general awareness about the things related to mental illness and addiction. And employers fear that organizational focus on mental health will actually increase costs related to mental health services. Other reasons why employers kind of look away at some of these issues is supervisors and colleagues hesitate telling on others. You don't want to rat your friend out, you don't want to rat your coworker out, you don't want to be a tattletale. What I find, my experience has been, somebody struggling, even if you approach them, sometimes they're not going to offer help, but sometimes just knowing somebody cares about them, just knowing somebody's like paying attention to them, for me can, for some people, be helpful to know that, man, maybe what I'm doing is noticeable, because we all think we're hiding it. Oh, I got hit, nobody knows. People can smell the alcohol in my breath. After I got fired from Dave Ramsey, I talked to one of the guys that was working with on my team. I knew he was in recovery himself, and but he told me after I got fired, he said, "I smelled alcohol." I was like, man, we think we're hiding it, but we're not. So sometimes just having somebody kind of pull you aside and say, "Man, is everything okay?" Maybe now we'll have a chance just because somebody actually cares about me, somebody actually cares about my well-being, and to have a person that I could rely on. We actually have somebody in our organization that was hired recently. He called me 2 days ago, literally from our parking garage, and said, hey, he trusted me, and he said, I'm struggling, and I actually drank last night. And so we're able to give folks like that help before it's too late. And so anyway, we'll keep moving on here. Counter to company culture. So legal constraints, employers are confused about their responsibilities under American Disabilities Act and are fearful of costly discrimination cases. The act makes it illegal for employees to discriminate against recovering alcoholics and drug users. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, employers cannot fire, refuse to hire, or refuse to promote someone solely based on a history of substance use or the fact that they enrolled in rehab. So just like somebody has a disability, a prosthetic, you can't not hire me just because of that fact. So substance use and addiction can kind of fall into that, but employers can be wary about that, so sometimes they just don't even want to get close to it. Understandably so. Substance dependence is a disability, but that doesn't mean that you have to keep someone or can't discipline them or can't set benchmarks to say, hey, your performance has dropped, we need you to approach somebody. You know that they've been struggling performance-wise, you think you might be associated with mental health or substance use disorder issue. You can say, look, give somebody some chances, give somebody a chance. Hey, look, we need you to perform these metrics in the next 2 months, or we're going to have to sit down and have a more difficult conversation. Offer them a chance to be able to kind of come around and maybe meet those performance metrics before letting somebody go. The following is an overview of the current legal obligations for employers and employees. So, an employee who is currently engaging in the illegal use of drugs is not an individual with a disability when the employer acts on the basis of such use. An employer may not discriminate against a person who has a history of drug addiction, but who is not currently using drugs and who has been rehabilitated. An employer may prohibit the illegal use of drugs and the use of alcohol in the workplace, having a drug policy in place up front, and having every employee, when they come on board, on the onboarding process, sign a piece of paper that says we have a drug policy, here's what it is. It's accessible through our internet, or it's always accessible here in the HR office. An employer may discharge or deny employment to persons who currently engage in the illegal use of drugs. They're tested positive, and that's part of your policy. You don't have to worry about any kind of legal obligations at that point. Employees who use drugs or alcohol may be required to meet the same standards of performance and conduct that are set for all other employees. And employees may be required to follow the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1998, rules set by federal agencies pertaining to drug and alcohol use in the workplace. So here's kind of a snapshot of, is anybody familiar with Tennessee Drug-Free Workplace? Know anything about it? I wouldn't assume you know much, so to give you just a quick little background on it. Great program. Not many states offer this kind of program, so the fact that Tennessee does have this set up is pretty unique. I want to say maybe less than 10 states around the country have something on this caliber. So the benefits, so here is, let's start with this. Establishing a Tennessee drug-free workplace, an organization has to do these 5 things. Complete this one-page application, simple enough. They have to have a written substance abuse policy. So that can be something as simple as copying and pasting somebody else's substance abuse policy from their organization onto your letterhead, and you can change the names or change any little bit that you want to in it, or you can have legal team write a whole new policy. You can do whatever an organization wants to do, but to have a written substance abuse policy implemented. Employee and supervisor training, that's what we're doing here. We do this for free, just so you know. Addiction Campuses, we're not making any money off of this. This isn't like we don't generate a huge revenue stream from this. We don't care. The point is, we're giving back to the community. This is the way that we're able to do that. What we do ask is that now we are hopefully a resource that you guys know about, and that Addiction Campuses, we're not American Addiction Centers. It's another organization. Our leaders actually broke away from American Addiction Centers, which are based out of Brentwood, and started Addiction Campuses with the hope of providing a different approach to treatment. And I'll touch on that a little bit later here at the end of one major thing that we do differently that nobody else in the industry's even begun doing yet. And so Addiction Campuses. The way I would encourage you to remember it, if you're dealing with students on campus, students struggling on this campus can come to our campus. We'll help them out, and we can send them right back here. Problem is, we don't take adolescents. We don't take anyone under 18 years old. But again, call our 800 number. We're going to have posters posted around. Shannon's going to take care of that. Have posters at all the schools here in the county that are going to have our 24-hour hotline number on it. So if any employee, if you or anybody you know just needs to go up and snap a photo of that 800 number and pass it along to a family member or a friend, or call it yourself. We place people in adolescence treatment centers all across the country every single day. Anyway, employee supervisor training, what we're doing here, drug testing, what I've already talked about, and then have access to an employee assistance program, whether the company or the institution has an official contract with an EAP, or just has a list of resources, which I think is what Shannon is, where there's a list of EAP resources. If somebody needs them, they can go to her and get that. So, an organization needs to meet these 5 criteria. Relatively easy. The hardest one that most people kind of get some pushback on is the drug testing. But if you can overcome that, then a lot of times companies can come on board. And what they get, here's the motivation for companies in our state to subscribe to the Tennessee Drug-Free Workplace, is they get a 5% discount on workers' comp premiums, which can be a pretty big deal. I believe even bigger impact is the shift of the burden of proof to employee. So this is huge. So let's say I'm working here, let's say I'm working for the school, and I'm on the teacher and coach, and I slip and fall because the floor is wet, but I'm high on marijuana, and a company is not part of the Tennessee Drug-Free Workplace. So I go get, it's company policy that if you get injured on the job, you go get drug tested, and if you have to go get medical help. And so I go get medical help, I'm drug tested, I test positive for marijuana, but I can go back to this, I can go back to the company and say, well, they're at fault because I slipped on their floor, and the company, the institution, has to hire legal counsel to be able to prove that they weren't, that it wasn't their mistake, that it was actually the individual who was high on marijuana. Well, if the company or institution is part of the Tennessee Drug-Free Workplace, the burden of proof switches to the employee. So now the employee, when they go get drug tested and they're tested positive, they have to prove that the institution was at fault. A lot of times they're not going to have time or the resources or the desire to run through going and getting an attorney, hire an attorney to go after the institution. They're just going to not file any kind of lawsuit. So that can be a big one. I mean, you keep one of those instances out of your organization a year, two a year. That's a big deal, right? That drains a lot of time and resources for upper management and HR personnel. Also provides just common sense stuff, safer workplace, reduction of turnover and training costs, and more productive and higher morale in the workplace. So like I said, we've already gone over that. Tennessee Drug-Free Workplace, Policy accomplishes two major things. It sends a clear message that alcohol and drugs in the workplace are prohibited and encourages employees who have problems with alcohol and drugs to voluntarily seek help. Creating drug policy. I'm not going to go over all these details with you guys. I'll pass on that. So types of drug testing that are available or that can be instituted with a drug policy is pre-employment testing, post-accident that resulted in an injury, reasonable suspicion, fitness for duty, so it's more safety-sensitive positions, and random testing. So reasonable suspicion and random testing, those kind of get confused and kind of have some gray areas. Reasonable suspicion is employer must detail in writing within 7 calendar days the circumstances and provide a copy to the employee upon request. So random drug testing isn't, hey, I smell marijuana on an individual, let's random drug test and put that person in the pot. That's not random drug testing. Random drug testing is where you actually have a system in place where a lot of organizations would just pick, have a list of all employees' names, and they're going to pick every seventh person down the list, and it can be done in any number of which ways. Anybody whose social security number ends in a 2, something like that, where it is actually random. Reasonable suspicion is you actually document that somebody is maybe using on the job. You've documented behavior. Things that you want to think about is if you do think of somebody struggling with a mental health or substance use issue on the job, and you're going to have a conversation or approach them or want to document some things, have somebody else with you. I'm sure you guys have been trained on stuff like this before, so this may just be reiterating that. When I got called into Dave's office, it was like 5 people in there. It's like they brought in like a team of people to make sure, like, here, everybody's an HR manager, my manager's manager, and Dave were all in the room, and they all were in agreement with email history, instant messaging history while on the job. They had things printed out, and a stack of papers this big of things that they documented, so this wasn't like just a surprise to me. I couldn't go back, no, I didn't do those kind of things. They had it printed, they had it right there, they had a team of people that were there. I mean, it was extremely intimidating, but up front, initially, if you see somebody struggling, maybe to hold you, keep you from maybe running into some kind of legal issue or an issue down the road, have somebody with you when approaching somebody. So it's not just your word against theirs, but that there's somebody there with you. Let's see. So I'll have internet access. I thought this video would have been.
You click on Google, you will.
Where's that? Like if I go to Google?
No, you go over there to your Wi-Fi and click Google. That one's open.
Questions at this point?
I do. One of the things that I have been thinking about during the first presentation and everything is we have employees who have children with terrible addiction problems that, us supporting those employees with those circumstances going on in their life outside of the classroom or the office or whatever, not knowing exactly how to support them, because they're outstanding teachers and they're, but they've got so much going on. That's something that for me as a supervisor is a concern.
Absolutely, that's a great one. Very common. Shannon, do you have any policy or anything that you guys have talked about in the past? I would want to defer to anything that you guys might have in place. It's tough. I don't know if I have a direct answer, but it's good that you voice it. I'm sure some other folks have run into that as well. Do you have,
We're
what do you typically recommend in that
We're
situation?
working on revising our drug-free workplace policy right now, and I'm going to work, or am working with Jenny to establish a list, basically, of resources and give you all her contact information, because as he was sharing in the presentation, and then she has shared with me, there's someone for every circumstance. We just have to get them to the right person. So
Yeah.
we're getting that together as part of doing all of this.
Good. So it sounds like providing better foundation for people to be able to direct them to, because I mean, you want to help, but you don't want to cross the line of like, we're here to work, we're here to get a job done. I can't do everything for you, but you care about the individual. You know they're struggling, and you know that their performance or that their mind is somewhere else because they're struggling with a child. I would if my kid was going through stuff.
Yeah, I would too.
I have a kid that's already got like my tendencies, and I'm just scared. He's 6, and I'm like, God, man, he gets to high school and college. Yeah, that does have to take a toll on
Well, their
folks.
performance suffers. I mean, that's the one thing that, especially this past year, I've noticed there's just been lots of things. I mean, her performance struggled, a lot compared to normal. Having to be she's on her phone all the time, dealing with it. I mean, there's just lots of issues there that we've got to address, and there's just such a fine line of knowing, what.
Yeah. I think Jenny Golden, who opened up, if you don't know her, Jenny Golden, who opened this up, is such a great resource. It sounds like she's getting more entrenched and digging her heels in deeper to be able to be better prepared for those types of situations, to move that person, that situation, say, here's some resources, please reach out to one of these. Somebody's got to be willing to get help too. You can be there all day long to kind of walk them through and hold their hand, but if they're not willing to invest in themselves and invest in their family, you can't just do it for them. So it's a good concern. Do I have anything else to bring up? So how HR can have an impact? HR, just like we're seeing here with Shannon, build a culture where regular communication regarding health and wellness is welcome. I think it's great to see Shannon be having the awareness that this is a major issue in most communities, around here, and particularly here in Lawrence County, to be able to open up the conversation. Let's have more of these conversations around health and wellness. And going back to the Rat Park video, it takes a community. It takes a community of people being willing to be connected, willing to be open, and willing to offer a hand of help for folks in need. Healthcare options, build a culture where healthcare options treat mental illness with the same urgency as physical illness. Policies promote employee emotional health and work-life balance, where there are protections for the confidentiality of employee health information. And I think that that's key, is to be able to tell somebody what conversation we have here is going to be just between us. We're not going to go talk about this publicly, but let people know that they can voice concerns without being judged or without being promoted throughout the entire institution, and where there's support for employees who seek treatment. HR can also have an impact in performance evaluation, making performance evaluation a priority. I know we do that at our company. It's great. I think it's great for my supervisor, sit down a couple times a year and review performance things. They kind of catch something early. Of course, in our field, we get a lot of people that we hire that are recovering alcoholics and addicts, and so performance review is looked highly upon. Regular checkups with folks. How you doing? How's your stress levels, things like that. So fortunate to be in an organization where those kind of, hey, are you going to your 12-step meetings? And these are conversations that we have openly in our organization. It may not be as appropriate in all organizations, but here's one thing that I would love is more institutions to be able to do. If somebody has voluntarily come up and said that they are a recovering alcoholic or addict, be able to make a reasonable accommodation. Just like if I have a prosthetic leg and I can't stand at the job all day, can I have a stool where I can sit down? Or it's a reasonable accommodation. Same thing, make a reasonable accommodation for counseling. Somebody's struggling, offer them resources for help. You come in 30 minutes late because your counselor's office doesn't open till, your counselor will open at 7. You work from, counseling session from 7 to 7:50, come in by, 8:15 or whatever. But to be able to make counseling, 12-step groups, things like that, a reasonable accommodation for folks. I don't know if that's realistic here, but something that is nice to have if you can. Give progressive discipline to at-risk workers, so they have a chance to get help, like we talked about earlier. Here's some performance metrics we need you to meet. You've been falling below those. We recognize that. Do you need any additional tools or resources to be able to keep you up performing at the level that we need you to? If they continue to hit underneath those, then let them know. We're going to have that more difficult conversation at the end of the quarter. If you fall short of those goals, do not eliminate the consequences of the disease. Again, if somebody's earned the right to be let go, then they need to be let go. And make a long-term commitment to participate in Tennessee drug-free workplace, which I think Shannon has that mindset. Supervisors' roles and responsibilities: maintain a safe, secure, productive environment for employees that you see. Evaluate and discuss performance with employees. Treat all employees fairly. Act in a manner that does not demean or label people. It's not your responsibility to diagnose drug or alcohol problems. You're not a counselor. You're not here to provide therapy sessions for folks. You're not a police officer, and you obviously you might not have all the answers. Recommended actions to take when confronted with a drug problem or alcohol situation at work is ask the employee to come to a private area with another supervisor and or security personnel. Inquire about the behavior, the rumor or report. Inform the employee of your concerns. Get his or her explanation of what's going on. And if you feel that there is a problem, notify your supervisor. If there is evidence or suspicion of recent use, and based on the employee's response in your drug-free workplace policy, a supervisor might refer the employee to the EAP or to HR. Place the employee on suspension until a formal investigation takes place. Arrange for the employee to be escorted home. I got stories for days. There's one where I showed up to a counseling appointment, pretty intoxicated, and counselor, within 5 minutes, was like, "Have you been drinking?" "Yes, sir." She's like, "How about we get your wife on the phone?" And this is like a Friday night. It was weird. This is where if I have trauma and I need to go to a trauma therapist, I was just going to a general psychiatrist, and it wasn't working for me, but I liked it. He was giving me the medications that I wanted. I didn't tell him I was addicted to some of the Adderall and Vyvanse he was giving me. So yeah, I've got a problem with alcohol, but I stopped at that. So I wouldn't be honest with him, but go into his office, and we scheduled it on a Friday evening. I go in there, I'm drunk, and my wife had just put our middle child to bed, who was 3 months old, and get her on the phone, speakerphone, and he escorted me home. In short, basically, it's sometimes somebody might be so bad that you don't just want to send them home in their own car, but have call in police or Uber, have them sit home safely. I've done that. Escort the employee to a collection site for drug tests if applicable. Constructive confrontation is tell the employee that you're concerned about their performance. State the problem. Refer to documentation of specific events if you've been documenting things. It's always good to have that in hand. And ask for an explanation. Don't just immediately accuse, but go and get their feedback. Some other things that encourage constructive confrontation is avoid getting involved in discussions of personal problems. Don't want to go too deep into personal issues. Try to get the employee to acknowledge what you see as the problem. State what must be done to correct the problem. Set a time frame for performance improvement. And specify the consequences if the problem continues. Things to do is to emphasize that you're only concerned with their work performance or conduct. Have documentation of performance in front of you when you talk with the employee. Remember that many problems get worse without assistance. And emphasize that conversations with an EAP, if applicable, are completely confidential. And that EAP is voluntary and it exists to help them. What you don't want to do, like we said a minute ago, don't diagnose a problem. Not really there to moralize, limit comments to job performance, conduct issues only. Discuss alcohol and drug. You're not really there to discuss alcohol and drug use. Don't be misled by sympathy evoking tactics. That's one thing I was really big on. I'm an emotional person. I think it goes back to my childhood where I was, something stressful comes up and I just kind of tear up at the drop of a hat. I've always just been kind of emotionally sensitive, hypersensitive. And so if somebody approached me, I'd easily kind of just go into tears and bring out my sob story. I struggled, my car accident. A lot of people aren't going to question that. But also a lot of people who are struggling use that as excuses and crutches for a long period of time. They may have used that as excuse over a long period of time. So just don't be completely misled by somebody that might be trying to cry to divert attention to something else. You're not there to cover things up. If you protect people or enable them to stay the same. So if the next step was for somebody to go to treatment, a lot of people don't even know this. So I didn't have this in my presentation a while back, but I added it just to provide you guys with a better base knowledge of what happens when somebody picks up the phone and calls into a treatment center, in particular us. I'm not going to go through over all of these details, but just kind of give you an overview. So Addiction Campus's assessment process. Somebody picks up the phone and calls us. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to find out if there's any participating event. First we're going to go through this assessment. We have treatment specialists that are highly trained. A lot of them are in recovery, so they know, they've been through it before. And to give you an idea of what kind of level of things that our folks, our call center folks deal with sometimes, our treatment specialists, is Megan, for instance, a couple months ago, she was on a call with a lady that says, I have a gun right here, it's loaded. I'm thinking about doing it. And so Megan had a conversation with her earlier, and what's your address? Got that information. So she picks up her cell phone, calls 911 on her personal cell phone, calls 911, gives them the address, tells them what's going on, and stayed on the phone with the lady until help got there. So our folks deal with stuff that heavy. This is life and death. We're not here to support your computer or support your software that's not working correctly. Your Norton antivirus or something. We're here to lives are completely in shambles. Families are falling apart. And people have no idea what to do. And we have folks that pick up the phone 8,000 times a month to answer the call. And so one of the things that we're going to do is take folks, if it looks like it might be a good fit for them to have them go through inpatient treatment, or to see if it is a good option for them, take them through an assessment. And what that looks like is, was there a participating event? A lot of times, was there trauma? Did they lose a job? Was there a divorce, separation? File for bankruptcy? Any number of these major issues that could lead to just a participating event to know, okay, here's the catalyst for what's going on right now. Substance use history. What did they use? What substance? How much are they using? So, like when my wife called into Addiction Campuses when I was my last relapse, they ask her these exact questions on the phone. And I go into my file now and I can see everything that. And a lot of those question marks, she didn't know what I was taking. So a lot of times a family member calls in, we don't know exactly how much you're taking or what they're taking, or how often, but we try to get a snapshot of where they're at. Also, these are photos of our facilities. Our Dallas facility is called the Treehouse. We have an actual treehouse where we do yoga classes out of, things like that. So these are just kind of giving you a picture of what kind of facilities that we operate. Detox symptoms, are they going through muscle aches, fevers, things that I mentioned in the last class that the video wasn't working there, but vomiting, diarrhea, these are things that come up with people that are detoxing. Treatment history, have they been through treatment before? How long have they been sober? Here's the mental health side of it. Bipolar, schizophrenia, seizures, PTSD, ADHD, blackouts, anorexia, gambling. Know about all of those. This is our Massachusetts facility called Swift River. It's on 600 acres. If they've been treated for mental health before. Current history or personal attempt to injure or cut themselves, burning themselves, suicide. We deal with this kind of stuff on a regular basis. Family history, substance use. What's their medical history? Who's their primary care physician? Can they contact the primary care physician? Any medical equipment needed? And then, of course, what medications the individual might be on. We want to know that. Employment history kind of helps us as well. And the big question when it comes to funding treatment is paying for it. Right? It's like that's the biggest barrier. Government was with Obama. He had signed the biggest bill that was going to open up a couple $2 billion for treatment help. It's just the beginning. You know, a lot more. But the biggest barrier for people getting help is funding. And there are a lot of relatively good state programs available. The problem is people without funding Medicare or Medicaid, those facilities are full most of the time, and so there's a long waiting list. So if you know somebody that might need help, and they might need to use Medicare or Medicaid, or don't have funding, you can find, there are places out there that work off of grants and things like this. You gotta get on the list. Yeah, so if somebody's struggling, get on the list early before it gets too bad, and they overdose before they even get to treatment, which happens far too often. But somebody with insurance is going to have a better chance, typically. Sometimes FMLA can be used. So, levels of care, spectrum of care, outpatient, as I mentioned before, can be where somebody can keep their job, somebody can keep their school work intact, but they go to either in the morning or in the evening. And for me, I went to Cumberland Heights one, which is like 3 to 4 hours at night for like 4 days a week, where I could go to work and then I could go get my outpatient care. Inpatient or outpatient is, outpatient's there. IOP, intensive outpatient, is going to be a little more regulated. You're going to have higher levels of counselors there. Detox unit is just somebody it's just kind of more of an acute issue. We need somebody brought down off medications, and then they would, like a hospital might have a detox unit, but they need to come down off of something, and then they go somewhere else. The residential or inpatient treatment, that's where we excel in. Partial hospitalization, a lot of inpatient treatment facilities offer kind of a step down, which is partial hospitalization, where they can still have their medications regulated, but they're not in the kind of the detox unit. And then sober living is somewhere outside of a treatment center. That could be like a halfway house kind of situation. A lot of times they operate on pretty cost-effective places to stay, and there's all kinds of ranges. There's really high-end places, and there's middle of the road and then low-end. The trailer that I was living in, I would not consider a high-end sober living facility. It would be more on the lower end, but I earned it. And then aftercare is when somebody leaves the facility, are they going to, after they come into a 30 or 60 or 90-day program, and then some programs can be over a year or a year or more. So before somebody steps out into the real world completely on their own, we'd want them to kind of go through one of the outpatient facilities, with counseling and therapy and support group meetings that they're going to go to. The reason why 12-step programs work so good, and why not really, as a member of a 12-step group, I'm not really supposed to promote, hey, I'm a member of AA, this is what AA does. We have principles intact that keep us from not just going out and actively putting it in the newspaper per se. It's Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous for a reason. We want people to be able to come in a safe environment and not be judged. But I believe the culture, we're having so many people die from this that we need to talk about it a little bit more. So I'm not going to talk about one specific 12-step group that I go to, but there are various ones out there. There's AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, NA, Narcotics Anonymous, CA is Cocaine Anonymous, there's Overeaters Anonymous. There's Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christian-focused, God-centered 12-step group, where some of these other 12-step groups is more spiritual-based, as opposed to religious-based. It's more spiritual, broaden whatever your God of your understanding is, bring it in, and you're accepted here. So there's a reason why support groups work so well, and it's because of the connection. It's because I can go and share and be honest. What's crazy is the first time I ever shared my story in a 12-step group meeting, when I came out of treatment the first time, I was so nervous and I just kind of fumbled through it. It was so weird at the end of that, and after all the crap that I just shared about myself and the truths I just shared about myself, I had this guy go, hey man, you need a job? You're talking about your out of work, and I got an opportunity for you. It's like only in a recovery support group can you go and just share and be completely honest and get a job offer out of it. So the reason those have been so successful over the years is because of that connection piece. here. Outpatient services, I've kind of talked about that. Kind of skip over that. Detox, I covered that. Residential inpatient treatment, talked about that. So aftercare, we just went over that. Here's where we separate ourselves from anybody else in the industry, is our aftercare program called A Balanced Life. Nobody in the treatment industry is doing this. And if you look at the statistics, the number of relapses that people have after treatment is 80 to 90, whatever percent. It's hard to track when somebody leaves a facility. If any facility says they know what their success rate is, it's hard to believe because you don't really know. Unless you have drones following the individual around 24/7 to know if they've relapsed or not, or if they're still engaged in 12-step work or still sober. But to have an industry that costs so much money to get in and to get somebody help, and to have such a lack of success is like unacceptable. But yet our field just accepts it. It's like, well, that's how it is. Okay, well, what can we do differently than anybody else is doing? And success increases for folks the longer that they're cared for. The longer that they are connected with another group outside of their heads and getting help from other people, the higher the success rate is. So what is nobody else doing? Nobody else has a long-term plan for helping folks outside when they leave their facility. We do. It's called Balanced Life. And it's a 15-month aftercare program where individuals, when they come into our facility now, this has just been implemented in like the last 2 months, they come to our facility, they're going to take the assessment. It's an online assessment, and they're going to know what our software program looks like. They're going to know what the back end of this looks like. They're going to know what areas of their life are more out of balance than others. Usually every area of somebody's life is out of balance when they come to treatment. Usually don't come in on a winning streak. But you come in and you find out what areas are most, do you need to focus on most. Is it the family aspect? Is it the social, work and finances? Is it your health, spirituality, or self-improvement? And so we figure out what needs to be focused on first, and they're going to start that process while they're in treatment. And when they leave treatment, this is only $1,000 for 15 months of being connected with our organization. They're going to have weekly support group meetings online, and you're going to have weekly coaching calls with a certified recovery coach, certified in addiction. And his name is our main guy is Charlie. As we're getting this off the ground, it's Charlie. And he sits 2 desks down from me, and he's a freaking amazing guy. And he's our guy that runs our support groups online right now. Every individual, when they come to our facility, are going to get these sets of books. We give them to them for free, or it's built into the $1,000. We're not making money off of this. It's not about making money. It's about increasing people's success rate when they leave our facility, so that they know that if they're struggling, that we have an alumni program that they can tap into on our private Facebook page, but also that they have this 15-month program. I'll spare you the little video here on it. Just trust me that this is Dr. Brooks, who works for us, helped design this program. He's a best-selling author, and we have an amazing team of people at our organization. It's the proudest project I've ever been a part of. I'm also an inventor. I invented a sock that manages sweat inside the prosthetic better than anything that's ever been created in 3,000 years of prosthetics since Egyptians came up with the first prosthetic toe. Within a year, had it developed and distributed around the world. And I've been a part of that project, as well as the film and TV projects I'm part of that have a global reach. But this is where God has led me, and I'm most proud of, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And I want to, again, thank you for your time and attention. Does anybody have any comments or questions before we wrap up here and let you be on your way?